All right, woodworkers, welcome back. The shop is still a wreck. We're not making any more progress on the small shop build, but that's okay. As you've ascertained from the thumbnail or the video title, we're going to have a pretty cool video today. I think it's cool. We're going to be comparing these two miter saws, really what I dub as the more professional, more dedicated, more capable version of a miter saw versus maybe a DIY or just entry-level hobbyist miter saw. Keeping in mind, of course, that this is what I started with, and I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with this saw. I just have been on the lookout for this saw, and I think I told you guys to get it up against the wall, I needed to ditch the sliding bar system and go to something like the Axial Glide. So that's getting a little ahead of myself, but just to tell you guys, I picked this saw up a little bit earlier than expected. I always on a hunt for a good deal. Found this Bosch GCM. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Bosch GCM12SD saw. So that's like the current version of the saw offered at the big box stores. For less than 50% of its value. It's an older saw. It definitely had some wear to it when I picked it up, but I cleaned it up as best I could. I put a new blade on it and oiled everything up right. I learned from my DeWalt 735 planer purchase where I should have gone through a used tool after I bought it. I recommend you all to do the same. And do some maintenance so that you don't run into issues later with it. So that's what I did. Today we're going to go ahead and just compare the two, what I think about them both, not necessarily which one is better, because like I said, they're totally different. I see the DIYer hobbyist using this one more than I do maybe see this one at a dedicated shop space for larger projects, since it's a 12-inch compound miter saw, or this is just a 10-inch compound miter saw. So without further ado, let's get into breaking down the Ryobi, since it's the one I'm most familiar with. Okay, so jumping right into the Ryobi here, and just so everybody's aware, it's the Ryobi TSS103 10-inch dual compound sliding miter saw. And so like I said, this is what I expect the DIY or the hobbyist to own, possess, use, or maybe even start with, and a great affordable option. A lot of people are like brand loyalists. If you've been watching me for a long time, you know that I'm not really a brand loyalist. I have Rigid tools, I have Ryobi tools, I have a lot of DeWalt tools. Now I have a Bosch tool. So and I have Grizzly, I really use, and Performax, which is now Jet. So just to get after it, I have a lot of different brands of tools. I go with what best fits my needs at the time, unless I'm going with a cordless tool. That's when I'll start to hesitate and gravitate more towards DeWalt, because I have so many DeWalt batteries before jumping onto another battery platform, because that's where it gets really expensive in my mind. But for my corded tools, I really go with what best fits my need. And this was actually another Facebook Marketplace find. I picked this saw up for $125, which I thought was a great deal. The equivalent of the current price for the same capability saw is up on the screen now. I'll talk you through what I have liked about this saw, and like I said, it's been a really capable, great saw for me starting out. So I like the sliding feature. I'll put the actual specification of the total slide amount. So the widest board, that you can cut with this saw is on the screen now. But you can always get around that by rotating the board and things like that. You can get creative with it. So that's where the 12-inch will give you a little bit more reach than the 10-inch will. We'll compare them here shortly. It is... like I said, you can set an angle, and it's got positive stats at 15 degrees, 0 degrees, 22.5 it should, yep, 30, and then all the way up to 45. And you can do 45 on either side of the saw here, which is great. As for the actual bevel feature of this saw, a little tight, go ahead and loosen it. You can only bevel out to 45 degrees on this side, and there are no positive stops for the bevel. So we'll see what the Bosch looks like on that one. As for its storage and capability, just like any other saw, keep it down, you can bring it forward and then lock this in place so it makes it a little bit more compact. It is a very light saw, which I think is great. If you're a DIYer, maybe you're even a contractor that's going from job site to job site, I wouldn't really call this a finish miter saw, but it definitely could be used as one. It's great for portability. It's got a small footprint. It's very light, very easily portable, and that stand over there folds up really well as well with it. Some things that I do like about this saw that I don't have the ability to enjoy because the saw didn't come with it when I bought it was you can adjust the fence. It comes with a clamp that you can clamp down to your workpiece, which I'll get to in a second, and it comes with some extendable wings. Again, nothing that I was able to get once I purchased from the first-hand owner. What I don't like about this saw, and I think this is pretty common to any 10-inch saw that you're going to get, is it's got a really small work surface. So if you're working with anything longer than I would say double the work surface, that's when you're starting to getting into a little bit of a dangerous area, especially if you don't have anything to clamp it down to the available work surface, of exceeding the capabilities of this saw, and you could get some tipping and some tension between the blade and the workpiece that you don't really want. So I got around that by buying the portable work stand that you can see in the back there, which has got some wings on it that you can adjust pretty far out and adjust the height of them. So I'd recommend that. It's got positive stops for the blade if you want to go only so far, like a depth stop essentially, which has worked well for me in the past. And then the last thing I really want to talk about here, or second to last thing, is the trigger mechanism, and I'll compare it to the Bosch here. So the trigger mechanism with this saw is there is a detent that you can hit with your index finger before pulling the trigger with maybe your middle finger and your ring finger, which allows the saw to start. If you don't push that detent down first, then you can't start the saw. Again, why I mention that is because this is really well placed and it's very easy to manipulate. I've never had an issue hitting the detent, starting the saw. It's never held me up. I don't think the Bosch is placed quite as well. As for everything else, really, it's a pretty nice saw. I don't use the angle or the bevel very much. Like I said, it's been very capable for me. I've been very happy with the saw. The last thing I want to mention, and I'll show it when I do the test cut on each, is the you hear some people talking about the laser guide or the shadow line that some saws offer. So the shadow line is really nice because it works off the blade here it shines a light right on the blade, and then it puts a shadow pretty much directly where the blade is going to impact the workpiece. I don't think it's great on this saw, although it's a nice feature. I've always found that it's a 16th, I'd say maybe an 1/8, but probably a 16th off. And so I offset the blade, and I'll show you that when we get into the cut. But it is a nice feature that it has for an affordable saw, so keep that in mind. All right, now we're going to jump into the Axial Glide review. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the Bosch GCM12SD, and what it's really known for, beside being a 12-inch dual compound sliding miter saw, is this Axial Glide feature that they have. Not necessarily proprietary to Bosch, although I do think they were the first to do it. Rigid used to make one, and I think the Delta Cruise is still a saw that you can buy. However, Bosch really was the first to do it, and so you can see as I extend it here to its full length, it kind of unfolds from itself, and then as I bring it back to its starting position, it folds again. You can lock it in place so that it becomes more just like a non-sliding miter saw. The benefit, though, is that you can sit it directly against the wall, and you get full extension of the saw without having bars that slide possibly back into a wall. So it works really well if you're incorporating it up against a wall, which is where you see this saw most commonly used. Okay, to talk about portability of this saw, I would say it is a 0 out of 10, not portable at all. It's super heavy, which is unfortunate. As for the work surface, it's got a very long and wide work surface, which is a benefit, but obviously contributes to how heavy it is. Okay, and then you've got these extendable wings here on the side, which allow you to, I think I already had it unlocked, extend out your work surface even more, which is obviously a big plus for when you're working with 8-foot boards or anything really double the work surface. As I mentioned on the Ryobi, and those are again integrated right into the frame of the saw, which I appreciate. You get this nice big fence here with measurements on it as well, and then you have your obviously adjustable for the angle up to 50 degrees on the left side and 60 degrees on the right, which is more, if you remember, than the Ryobi had. So we'll move that, and then you can come all the way out, and let's see if it's got these positive stops. There's at 45, 30, maybe just a little over, 22.5, 15, and back at 0, and that's dialed in. Okay. All right, so back to what I was saying about the bevel feature. I had to learn a little bit about it. So interestingly enough, this one does bevel to the left and to the right, whereas if you remember from the Ryobi, it was only to the left, I believe, maybe only to the right. Either way, one-sided bevel. So this one does both. Now to do that, which is a neat feature that Bosch has incorporated, let's say that I want to bevel to the left. The other nice thing is that all the bevel controls, everything are right here, so you never have to reach behind the saw. Okay, so I'm gonna just move it so that it doesn't lock itself, and I wanna bevel all the way 45 degrees on the left here. If you notice, I am now going to cut right into my fence, which is definitely not what you wanna do. So I'll go ahead and just bring it back to 0 real quick, lock it into place. These fences actually slide, which is a really neat feature, so that when I want to do my bevel cuts, unlock, there it is, positive stop at 30, that's fine. I can now do the cut and not worry about running into my fence. So that's really neat, and same to the left side there. It's a bit of a bear of a saw to manipulate, although it's really pretty easy to do with one hand. I'm a smaller guy, so we'll go to the left here, and to the right, you've got more features. So you tilt slightly to the left, rotate it to the right. So we'll unlock, so tightly to the left, rotate the knob to the right, and then we come this way. There we go, positive stop again. So neat feature. Set that back to 0. Okay, and back down. All right, set that back in. Now, two areas that I can't cut on, touch on, that's funny, cut on, until I actually use the saw, which we'll do momentarily here, are the dust collection, although I also believe that it will be abysmal given how far away the dust collection on this saw is. However, you can go through TSO Tools, I believe, and buy their upgraded, it's not TSO, it's Shop Nation, sorry. Shop Nation Tools online and buy their upgraded saw. This is one, or dust collection for this saw. This is one of the saws that they offer upgraded dust collection for. So I would look into that. I'm going to shortly here. Now, something about this saw that some people don't love, it's kind of like mixed review on it, is that, like I said earlier, on the corded version of the saw, they don't offer a laser or a shadow line. Depending on who you talk to, and really I agree, depending on the type of craftsman you are, you don't really need a shadow line or a laser line. It is nice, however, to initially line up your cut, right? I throw a board on there, I just want to know where to kind of guide it by doing this with my saw, instead of having to bring the blade all the way down, mark it, move it, whatever. It's like an extra 2 seconds of work. Now, interestingly enough, whoever owned this saw before me, let's see if I can move this blade guard out of the way, zoom in on the camera, added like an aftermarket laser that's got some gyros in it. When it fires up the saw, when it starts moving, it throws that laser on. So we'll see what that looks like. The guy I bought it off of said it was a horrible laser, and I kind of agree with him. Just seeing where this laser sits, it's a good, like, almost, I feel like 1/4 of an inch, if not just a little less, where that laser shoots out to where the actual kerf of the blade will rest on the workpiece. So I think it'll be pretty useless, but we'll go ahead and test it off. So overall, I'm happy with the saw. I think it's a great saw, very capable. It would be a great finish saw because it allows you to bevel to the left and the right, especially if you're doing trim for trim carpentry. However, it's just not very portable, so I don't even think the cordless one would be great on a job saw. It's almost a 2-man lift. Let's go ahead and get some boards thrown down. We'll cut, we'll compare dust collection, and then the actual capabilities of the saw. All right, so we're going to do our test cut on the Bosch first. Got a piece of plywood here that I know is square. Sorry for that loud noise. Is square on the end here, so we'll cut. I've got my dust collection hooked up, and I'm curious to see if we'll blow a fuse because I've got the dust collection and this big 12-inch miter saw plugged into the same circuit. So let's go ahead here. We'll start that. It'll be loud for a second. All right. So as I kind of initially guessed, that laser is terrible. It is, I would say, about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little less, maybe an eighth, away from the actual blade. So I don't know what that would be worth. I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can see it, but it's very hard to see anyways. I just think if you buy this saw, just go ahead and anticipate using it without a laser or a shadow line. There's also an upgrade that you can put an LED up here, but I don't really like it because you have to put like an aftermarket kind of clip-on LED near a rotating blade, just like never something that I would probably want to do, not worth it. What I did test is I drew my line with my square, as you can see, and then right here I put that arrow, the tip of the arrow, right on the edge of my line, and I put the kerf of the blade right on my straight line that I drew with the speed square. And then I cut, never having made a cut with this before, just to see how accurate it was. Because like I said with that Ryobi, I feel like I have to put the blade about 1/16 of an inch to the right of where I want to cut directly on the line. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Whereas this one, I felt like I was spot on. Now that, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I think that can all be dialed in with adjusting some of the settings of the saw, tuning the saw. But it's just something that I've always had to deal with on that Ryobi. So let me zoom you in here so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so as you can see, I've set the saw here like directly where I would cut it, so that it would cut at on my line, and then you'll see where the laser comes on in respect to that line. So you see there's really no way that I can get a pencil in there to mark where that laser actually shoots, but I would say it's an eighth, if not closer to 1/4 inch off of my line. So useless, however, pleased with the cut. We'll have to look at dust collection later. Okay, so I've got the Ryobi set up now. You can see I've drawn same exact test. I drew my line with the speed square, drew my arrow right on the line, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to place the kerf of the blade right on that line, and I'm going to cut, and we're just going to see what happens to that arrow. And the shadow line is actually pretty accurate, I would say. Hits about where you would think, well, I'd say it's maybe 1/16 off. So anyways, you can see it there, and I'll zoom in a minute. Let's go ahead and cut. Okay, so let's see if I can zoom in and you can see that. You almost wouldn't notice, but I think it took off about 1/16 of the tip of that arrow, whereas if you look at the arrow from the Bosch, well, it looks just as bad because I drew a bad arrow. But I think it was more accurate with the Bosch. Like I said, you may be able to get that fixed up with some tuning, but that's just my take. Okay, so now you can see the shadow line, and I think it's clearer than that laser that was on my Bosch. I hate to even compare it though, since that Bosch isn't supposed to have that laser. So I'll just say for a shadow line, I think this one is pretty good, pretty accurate. But I find it that it's most accurate, believe it or not, when the blade is touching the workpiece. Which at that point, do I really need a shadow line? Because like when I said, it's useful for when you initially line it up. But as you can see, if you can see it there, that's like barely bringing the blade down so that the shadow line is even useful. And it's off. So I'd bring it all the way down anyways, and you might, get to about there, about 1/4 of an inch above the workpiece, before you would know really where to set the blade. Okay, so having just taken you through some of the features of both saws, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and then showing you the kind of cut test, I have a hot take. So my hot take is that the Ryobi performs super well. It's a very capable saw. It's extremely affordable. It would be great for the DIYer, the hobbyist, and maybe even further for what I consider someone like myself. Not a professional, but building large pieces of furniture like that big dresser I built for my son, excuse me. I don't know if it's really worth the at least $600 price tag that you commonly see on this big Bosch. I said it earlier, I've never really run into a capacity issue as for what my 10-inch miter saw could cut. Even though now I know I'll probably never run into it with a Bosch. I can count on one hand, I might have had like a 10-inch wide or 12-inch wide board of walnut that I had to flip to cut down, cross-cut accurately with this 10-inch. But hardly ever are you cross-cutting something that big. Now, what I will say, I think this is the nicer saw. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think just based off the price, the engineering that went into this thing, it's like a no-brainer that you're going to get a higher quality machine for that price. This was a smoother saw, it was a quieter saw, and I'm going to say the dust collection was better. This one, not that I've ever really noticed it, but as soon as I used it right after cutting with the Bosch, this was like way more aggressive. It felt like, oh man, this is like a huge saw in my hand. I'm bringing it down to cut, and the dust, just exploded past the workpiece. I didn't even notice that. It didn't even cross my mind when I used the Bosch. I just brought it down, did my cross cut, that was it. Dust collection was managed, it was smooth, it was a lot quieter, so I'm happy about that. Definitely better for a small enclosed space. Again, is that worth an extra probably $400 what you're paying per? Now, I will compare it to the 12-inch saw price point, which is on the screen now, just because I'm technically comparing a 10-inch saw to a 12-inch saw right now, which is not super comparable price-wise. So, a lot of talking this video, not a lot of doing. Different than my usual videos, I kind of started off this channel with more tool reviews, and I've kind of idled away from that because I think there are a lot of tool reviews on YouTube already. Now, what I like about the review I just did, I'm not being paid by either one of these companies. No one asked me to do this review. It's just something that I thought would be neat, given that I'm upgrading from the DIY hobbyist saw, and I know a lot of us DIYers, hobbyists, have our sights set on these big, flashy tools, the expensive ones, but I thought it might be interesting to hear my take, saying that maybe I didn't really need to upgrade. Now, I got a great deal on this, so I'm not sorry I did it, but I definitely don't think I would have paid $670 for one of these brand new off the shelf. This was a capable saw, and I could have gone on using it for a long time. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Always curious for your perspectives. I know a lot of you are working in your own shops. So again, guys, thanks for watching. This has been 5 o'clock Woodshop. Like, subscribe, and comment for more. We'll be starting the rest of the shop build soon.